This was not a famine caused by drought, war, or bad luck. It was caused by economic policy replacing arithmetic with ideology. Between 1959 and 1961, up to 45 million people died. Food existed, land existed, labor existed. The system failed. This is the deadliest economic collapse in recorded history, and almost no one understands how it actually happened. This story begins with a system that believed it could command output, not incentivize it, not price it, simply order it into existence. In the 1950s, China was still overwhelmingly rural and agrarian. Around 80% of the population depended on farming. Agriculture was not one sector, it was the survival system itself. Food production determined stability, legitimacy, and control. After 1949, the state consolidated power and reshaped the economy. Land was redistributed. Small cooperatives replaced private farms. Early results looked positive, and output initially increased. This early success created a dangerous confidence in central control. Leaders believed production could be scaled by political will alone. By 1958, this belief hardened into the Great Leap Forward. The goal was not reform, it was acceleration at civilizational speed. China would industrialize in years instead of decades. It would surpass Britain in steel and industrial output. To do this, rural China was reorganized into people's communes. Private farming was abolished across vast regions. Private food storage was criminalized. Families no longer cooked at home. Communal kitchens replaced them. Eating was collectivized. Work was collectivized. Survival was pooled. Farmers no longer worked for their households. They worked for quotas. These quotas were not based on soil, weather, or yields. They were based on political expectations. This is where the arithmetic first broke. Local officials were rewarded for reporting success. Failure was punished as political disloyalty. Grain output figures began to rise on paper. In reality, harvests stagnated or declined. Each reporting layer inflated numbers slightly. The center assumed the figures were real. Beijing believed the country was producing record harvests, so state grain procurement was increased aggressively. Grain was seized for cities and industrial workers. Grain was seized for exports to fund development. In some regions, the state took more grain than existed. The books balanced, the villages did not. Farmers began to run out of food first. Local reserves had already been confiscated. Private storage was illegal and harshly punished. There was no buffer left in the system. Scarcity appeared suddenly and violently. The famine had begun invisibly. At the same time, labor was pulled out of agriculture. Millions were reassigned to industrial projects. Others were sent to backyard steel furnaces. Much of this steel was unusable. Fields were left unattended during planting cycles. Harvests failed simply from neglect. Agriculture is timing dependent. Seasons cannot be postponed. Miss one cycle and output collapses the following year. This damage was delayed, which made it harder to detect. Central planners assumed labor was interchangeable. They treated farmers like movable units. Biology disagreed. Food distribution inside communes followed labor points. Effort and reward were disconnected from output. Working harder did not guarantee more food. Working less did not guarantee less. This destroyed the most basic incentive structure. Productivity collapsed quietly. Some farmers reduced effort rationally. Others hid grain to keep their families alive. The system interpreted this as sabotage. Punishments intensified. Enforcement became brutal. Output fell even further. The feedback loop turned fatal. As starvation emerged, reporting it became dangerous. Admitting shortages meant admitting policy failure. Failure was treated as political opposition. Local cadres concealed deaths and hunger. Data stopped reflecting reality. The system lost its senses. Famines are not caused by a lack of food. They are caused by a lack of access. Grain existed but was inaccessible to producers. Markets were abolished. Prices were silenced. No signal could communicate scarcity. The economy stopped allocating resources. Starvation spread unevenly across regions. Areas with stricter enforcement suffered more. Weather did not explain the pattern. Policy intensity did. Entire villages disappeared from records. Children were hit hardest. Birth rates collapsed alongside food availability. Families were forced into impossible decisions. In some areas, cannibalism was recorded. These were not isolated incidents. They were system failures reaching human limits. Death became administrative silence. Estimates place excess deaths between 15 and 45 million. The range itself reflects data collapse. Accurate counting became impossible. This was not just a humanitarian disaster, it was an economic system failure. The allocation mechanism had broken completely. After 1961, policies were quietly reversed. Communes were loosened, private plots returned. Informal markets reappeared almost immediately. Food production recovered rapidly. This speed matters for understanding causation. The land had never failed. The famine was not caused by climate or population. It was caused by structural design. Central planning removed feedback loops. Ideology overrode arithmetic. Bad news became intolerable. Correction became impossible. Every large collapse follows a similar pattern. Early success creates overconfidence. Feedback is suppressed to protect authority. Incentives distort behavior. Arithmetic stops working. Human cost explodes. The Great Chinese Famine is the extreme case. It shows what happens when systems punish reality. Modern systems use different language. Models replace quotas. Forecasts replace slogans. But the danger is unchanged. Reality does not negotiate. Economies are survival systems, not abstract games. When they fail, people do not lose numbers. They lose time, health, and life. This collapse was not inevitable. It was engineered unintentionally through design, and that is why it matters today. By any honest definition of economic collapse, measured in human cost rather than GDP, this may be the worst collapse in history.